Hey everybody, well, it's just time. Hey, today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this insane plan that America made back in, I think it was the early 50s they came out with this. And it's their insane plan to survive a nuclear attack by Russia. This is how we thought like back in the early 50s and stuff. So this article I got is from uh, uh, the guy that wrote it. His name is Zachary Keck, and it was crazy what America thought back in those days. So instead of just sitting here and stumbling through it, I have a few notes written down here, and we'll try to get through this fairly quickly. So, but I thought it was just kind of interesting that America had its mindset like this. And I'm kind of wondering what they would have, or what they have up their sleeve now, if this is what they had up their sleeve then. So, what happened was during World War II, America emerged as one of the strongest nations. Matter of fact, most people thought that we were the most powerful nation on earth. So not only did it produce half the world's economic output, but it was also a sole possession of the most devastating weapon ever created, which was the A-bomb, or whatever you want to call that, back in the day. And so after the war, General Leslie Groves, a brilliant manager of the Manhattan Project, he predicted that the Soviet Union would not explode its first atomic bomb for at least 2 decades. So the United States was therefore shaken by that and entered the nuclear club on August 29th of 1949. And that was a harrowing experience, and it was quickly overshadowed by a project of Moscow, and it was acquiring a thermonuclear weapon. And it was meant to deliver it to the United States, our homeland. So the implications of that was brought into sharp relief in March 1st of 1954, and that's when the United States conducted its first test of the deliverable H-bomb, known as Castle Bravo. That was the code name for it. And the scientists badly misjudged the yield of the bomb, which was about 15 megatons compared to the 5 or 6 megatons that they were actually predicting. Now, this was resulting in radioactive fallout went far beyond the test team expectations. They were figuring nearly killing the testing team in the process. So that was pretty far out there. The test did contaminate nearby islanders, as well as the unlucky inhabitants of a Japanese fishing boat, the Lucky Dragon. But that happened to be in the area at the time of the test, and all the crew became really sick, and one person died shortly after returning to Japan. So after the test, President Eisenhower, he had science advisors, and they superimposed the fallout patterns of the Castle Bravo test on the map. And what they found was, as ground zero, the results were pretty shocking. And then Annie Jacobson, she worked on the project. She recounts in her fantastic book, History of DARPA. So if you're wanting to know even more information on that, go check that book out. So if ground zero had been Washington, D.C., every resident of the greater Washington, Baltimore area, they would have been dead without a Station 70 style bunker for protection. So the entire population living there would have been killed by a 5,000 megaton exposure bomb in just mere minutes. So even in Philadelphia, which was 150 miles away, the majority of inhabitants would have been exposed to radiation levels that would have killed them within an hour. And New York City was 225 miles north, and half of that population would have died by nightfall. So all the way to the Canadian border, inhabitants would have been exposed to 100, it's a hard word, I have it written down here, it's still hard, roentgens, I believe is the right way, or more. They're suffering similar to what the fishermen in the Lucky Dragon had endured. So the prospect of the Soviet Union being able to wreak this kind of devastation on America was not only terrifying for the U.S. officials, but also it created an enormous quandary for strategy. Now, after all, America's strategy was to use nuclear weapons to offset the Soviet Union's quantitative advantages in Europe. So this strategy was plausible when Moscow couldn't retaliate against the U.S. homeland, and possibly it could have only do so with a limited number of atomic weapons. But how could it really be an age of thermonuclear weapons that destroyed the entire cities? Well, the civil defense was one idea to make the strategy work. The thinking was that if the United States could limit the damage the Soviet Union could do to the homeland, the threat to use nuclear weapons in Europe would be more credible. So in the popular imagination, the civil defense was become synonymous with the duck and cover drills in American schools. Remember those back in the day, guys? In reality, the plans were much more elaborate, though not any less insane. Throughout the 50s and the 60s, the U.S. government facilitated between plans, and they called for evacuating cities, and one of that centered around the building of fallout shelters. You remember all the fallout shelters that were marked clearly on the outside of their buildings to allow urban areas to ride out the attacks. The responsibilities and roles of the federal, state, and the local governments were also constantly in flux. And how much money to devote to these efforts was frequently debated. Now, the federal government went to considerable lengths during the Eisenhower administration to make these civil defense plans seem plausible, even if the president himself doubted their efficiency. For example, starting in 1954, the United States began holding an annual nationwide exercise called Operation Alert. Now, I don't know if you younger people can remember that, but I do. And it practiced how to respond to a Soviet nuclear attack on our American cities. And the results were really not encouraging. Congress had also tried to enhance Americans' confidence in their ability to survive a nuclear war. Most notably in 1956, it began holding a series of hearings called the Holyfield Committee, named after the Democratic Congress member, Get Holyfield. And he was an especially strong proponent of civil defense. The hearings were nothing if not exhaustive, as one historian will tell you about it. Now, the 1956 Holyfield hearings were nothing if not exhaustive, and they lasted for up to 6 months and included 211 witnesses whose testimony filled 3,145 pages. They compromised the most thorough investigation of the civil defense that had ever been undertaken. Now, if the purpose of the hearings was to bolster public confidence in the civil defense project, they were a spectacular failure. Hold a second, guys. Coffee. Okay, so it was outrageous that what their efforts were. The most devastating testimony came from Val Peterson. Now, I don't recognize that name. I must have slept way too many nights. And he was a former governor of Nebraska who Eisenhower appointed as the director of the Civil Defense Administration. And that was during the hearings, Peterson revealed that the plan of the administration was to dig roadside trenches along public highways leading all the way to the big cities across the nation. The trenches were to be 3 feet deep and 2 feet wide. And that's how deep our ditches are right now. So that has stayed there all this time. And when the bomb hits the cities, Peterson said people who had already made it out were to stop driving, pull alongside the road, and get down in these trenches and cover themselves up with dirt. And naturally, this prompted a senator to ask how the government intended to provide basic services such as food and water and sanitation to the people in these trenches. Well, Peterson admitted that obviously in the trenches, if they are built on an emergency basis, they would not have things. In fact, the entire food situation would be quite grim. I think the best we will be able to do in the United States is to run soup kitchens. You guys remember the soup kitchens, right, during the Great Depression? Well, Peterson said we can't eat canned foods. We won't be able to eat refrigerated foods. We will eat gruel, which is made of wheat that's cooked and it comes out of the fields. It's corn parched and animals will be slaughtered just in time to eat them so that they will not have as much radioactivity that destroys them. So, summoning his inner Hobbes, Peterson declared that if this kind of war occurs, life is going to be stark. It's going to be elemental, brutal, filthy, and miserable. In other words, the survivals will most likely be envying the dead people. So they were thinking that, hey, it's better to be dead than go through all this emotional distress, you know. So the civil defense efforts were not completely for naught, however. For instance, the need to evacuate the cities was one of the rationales for building the federal interstate highway. The civil defense planning also forced the government to consider how to ensure a continuity of the government following an attack. This led Washington to build elaborate shelters for the president and all the cabinet members, all the executive branch. So all the measures were necessary to enhance the credibility of America's strategic deterrent, which ultimately prevented the civil defense plans from being needed at all. That was when they put all those bunkers in the big cities underground. They put the signs out on the outside of the buildings. So, if we get under a nuclear attack, it's really going to be quite devastating. Most people won't even know what to do. So, my suggestion to everybody that's watching this video right now is to take the time out of your day to find out what you can do in your area in order to survive a nuclear attack, because I'm sure that each city has their own procedure in place, but I'm sure that it's going to be far from perfect. You may want to decide to make your own security way of taking care of yourself during an atomic blast. So that's all I have for today, you guys. It's really totally plenty if you ask me. And I want you guys to remember that today's Friday, so Saturday night at 8 o'clock we have the live stream where we sit around and shoot the crap about everything that's going on, what isn't important and stuff like that. Actually, we don't even talk about politics or anything that's going to upset anybody. It's just a nice, quiet evening alone with each other where we can pick each other's brains and try to network a little bit and make our channels even better than they are. So, for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. I have some other things in play. Don't forget to send all your friends over to the channel for the big giveaway for the 2K push that we're putting on. They're starting to fall in place now. People from outside the channel are starting to subscribe, and I really want to welcome all those new people to the channel. I want to make sure that you understand to get over there and look for that 2K push giveaway, and it's in the playlist on my home channel. If you click the playlist, you'll go down. I think it's a second or third box that says 2K push, and that's where you answer the questions that I've asked you to become eligible. And if you're going to put a VR, you do a VR, that'll be your second entry into the contest, so that you'll have 2 chances to win one of those fantastic prizes that we have. So go over there, look in that playlist, find the rules out, and get in there and do what you got to do to have your name in the hat for that big giveaway. Other than that, that's all I have for you guys. I want you guys to know I can't do any of it without you. I really can't. It's getting where I love you guys more and more every day. My phone don't. It keeps going blurry on us, but someday we'll get all that straightened out too, one thing at a time. I want to thank you guys for this terrific, if you look right here, right there, I got it to focus. If you look right here, you guys bought this microphone for me, and you guys get a big thumbs up for that. So till next time, which is tomorrow, 8 p.m., God bless you, God bless me, and God bless USA. Thanks for watching. See you out there on the tube.